Senator Fraser-Benz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see my leader looking at me almost in shock because he asked me earlier if I'm going to speak, and I'm like, I'm really not so sure at all. But I could not help, Mr. President, to really stand and make what I deem to be very brief, yes, Senator Gale, very brief comments on this bill because it is such an important bill. Mr. President, girl, the way you look good, me have to ball out. Look like you're born with gold spoon in your mouth. Did it hurt when you fall from heaven, angel? Brown skin. What I want to wrap around my hand, brown skin. And I cited these, Mr. President, because over the years, these are the things to which women in particular have been subjected to. Whether it is on the street side, in the bus park, or even in the office space, these are the things that we have been subjected to. And it is in recognition of the fact, not so much about giving a compliment, but the fact that so many of the persons who are intended to be complimented are offended, that I believe that this bill is being debated here today. And this recognition, and whereas I give congratulations to the minister and her team, this recognition predates 2020. Because in 2016, former Prime Minister Portia Miller opened the debate on the sexual harassment bill in the lower house to successfully pass, and former Minister of Justice Mark Golden opened it in the Senate, but the debate was closed due to the prorogation of Parliament. And I say that because one of the things that we can agree to is that the issue of sexual harassment knows no color. It knows no political alignment. What it knows is that persons are offended and there is not sufficient legislation, or there's an absence of legislation to make that redress. Now, Mr. President, I am particularly pleased with this legislation because, and Senator Scott Martin spoke about the Joint Select Committee and the benefits of it, and I too want to agree. Because Senator Natalie Rodriguez, I'm not sure if this was your first Joint Select Committee, but you would agree that we learned so much more from the interaction with the persons who presented than what was contained in this legislation. It caused us as parliamentarians to get over the unease that we may feel in dealing with certain issues and understand the angst that presenters and the organizations they represent feel, and force us to come to a decision on how to make a piece of legislation that best deal with these issues that are faced by males and females. And so I'm very happy about it. One of the things that, and you know, the good thing about the Joint Select Committee is that, and I'm not sure, yes, it was before COVID, it was during COVID, and a statement was made by one of the members, and that caused a lot of public, I'm going to call it public relations. But the good thing about it is that it drew the attention of the country to what was being debated. Because from that point, I believe that almost every single Jamaican stopped and said, what? Sexual harassment? What is that? And they would tune in because they want to hear what is being discussed. And I think that is a good thing. But what I have realized is that a lot of persons still do not understand that this piece of legislation is very specific in how it treats with sexual harassment. So, for example, it deals with sexual harassment in the workplace. So we need to understand that it is not sexual harassment carte blanche. It deals with sexual harassment in the workplace. So if an employee feels that he or her is harassed by the employer, then it deals with this piece of legislation. And vice versa. because the employer can also be harassed. Can also be harassed. It deals with sexual harassment in institutions such as our schools, our universities. And that is something that we need to talk about, because so many times we hear students on campuses that talk about their experience and the lack of adequate redress. What I particularly like about this legislation is that it's gender neutral, and Senator Crawford stepped out. It's gender neutral. And perhaps his theory is correct, I don't know. But what I know from the information available to me is that women are generally more impacted or are generally the victims of sexual harassment than males. But notwithstanding that, this piece of legislation says whether you're a male or you're a female, if you feel that there is unwanted sexual advances, then you have redress in this piece of through this piece of legislation. And that is something that I want to commend. I'm particularly happy, Senator Longmore, that in the Joint Select Committee, the psychological effect on the individual was discussed at length. At one point, we wondered if we were doing a course. I mean, you see something on campus, you know, and Senator Longmore was our lecturer. We wondered. But it was so good that we had the benefit of that knowledge and that information, because there became an understanding by not just the members of the committee and the technical team, but by those listening, about the psychological effect that sexual harassment has on persons. And, you know, I do recall sharing my own experience of when I worked in another institution, where a lady came to us and confessed that she was molested, and after 40 years, because she was medicated, she was able to speak about it. And Senator Longmore, I believe you were in that committee meeting when he said, that is what happened. Because persons are so traumatized that they repress it, and years later, they're able to talk about it. And I believe that the absence of counseling over the years has not helped, and with the provision that, or the mandate that in this piece of legislation, whether through the tribunal or the workplace, that individuals will have counseling, I think is going to be helpful. The issue of sexual harassment, and I think I understand where Senator Crawford was going with this, because it is such a personal thing. It is subjective. And I may not have a problem with someone saying something to me, but certainly Senator Scott Motley may find it very offensive. And the fact that I do not have a problem with it does not make it right for Senator Scott Motley. And so there are two things that I addressed my mind to throughout the whole consultation. Was one, that this subjectiveness that it offers is not abused. And I believe that all of us were cognizant of that and very much aware that the possibility for abuse does take place, or well, can happen, which is why there's a provision at Section 40 that ensures that if somebody dare to go about and spread untruth or fabricate an experience against another, then they will be dealt with, and dealt with severely. And this is something real. In my other occasion, I had an example of a young man who came to me because there was a hearing against him in his office that he sexually harassed an employee, his staff. And when he came to me about the matter, he was beside himself. And that matter dragged on for almost 3 years before it could be resolved. And I can only tell you that during those 3 years, he was traumatized, he was affected, his work was impacted. At the end of the 3 years, the matter was resolved clearly in his favor. And he never ever became the same person. He just did not. He was so impacted that, you know, something as simple as when he travels, he would take back chocolate for his staff. He just stopped. something as simple as that. And we have got to be very careful that persons do not fall or do not take advantage of this provision. The other thing that came to mind in looking at this provision was a need for ongoing public education, because it is very easy for one to say, oh no, we have a Sexual Harassment Act, so we can do X or Y. Public education is going to be important, and I know that the legislation speaks about workplace having their sexual harassment manual and having their education, because it's important that staff members are made aware of what is sexual harassment, what is deemed sexual advancement, so that they are clear in their minds, so that if and when that situation occurs, there is no doubt and it can be addressed. Mr. President, the issue of the review period, and I share the concern with Senator Scott Motley about the time frame, and particularly because, not only because it will not give persons sufficient time to really understand or experience the working of the legislation, but because the fact of the matter is that there are so many pieces of legislation we have now that are due for review that we just have not done. We continue to legislate a review time in almost every legislation that comes into this House. And regrettably, we have failed to observe those review periods. I'm hoping that we will show our commitment to the Sexual Harassment Bill, Sexual Harassment Act, by ensuring that on the 18th month, we start the process to review. And I say that, you know, not to cast any blame, but remember the Road Traffic Act and the rush to pass the Road Traffic Act. And to date, it is still not in effect. I mean, there are so many examples that one can cite, and I'm just praying that this does not fall into that category, and we will show our commitment to it by ensuring it is reviewed at the right time. And in closing, Mr. President, I cannot but express my own gratitude to the entire team. I mean, being a member of the committee, but there's one individual who I believe must be commended, apart from the minister and her commitment to it, but Ms. Robinson. She was at every meeting. She answered all the questions. She provided the information. And I know she is not a one-man team, but I really want to use the opportunity, Minister Johnson-Smith, to commend her for the work that she has done, not just in relation to this bill, but what she has been doing at the Bureau, and wish for her and her team continued success. I know that the work has just started. I pray, Minister, that all the resources that will be required to give this act its full effect will be made available. And with that, Mr. President, I thank you, and those are my very brief comments. Senator Gale? It was brief, right?
Thank you very much, Senator Fraser-Binns.